Hi, everyone. Welcome to the ARINGO MBA admissions conversation about J-Term. We're super excited to be talking to everybody today. So thanks for joining. As we go along today, please take a moment to share in the comments where you're joining us from. And if you are applying to said J-Term, and you already know you are, go ahead and add that to the comments as well. And so we'll love to kind of hear where everybody's from and what your plans are. And then we'll go ahead and get started with our presentation where we talk about J-Term. So the first thing that we want to talk about is, who is this J-Term for? Is it a fast track or is it a trap? So first thing that you want to know is that, you've got this traditional 2-year MBA program where you got 24 months. You got a summer internship. Usually you have a really high opportunity cost by being out of the workforce for 2 years, plus you have tuition, cost of attendance, etc. And then it is more competitive just in general. And then we have, on the other hand, this J-Term start. And some people are calling it kind of the side door to get into top MBA programs, because typically it could be about 6 months. There's not an internship in some of them do. We'll get into that. And then the lower opportunity cost is less time in school, less time away from your job and income, a little bit lower opportunity cost there. And then because it's not the most traditional time that people are actually starting an MBA program or applying to it, then it makes your chances even better. All right, so today we are going to talk about who J-Term is for, the top programs that are offering a January intake or a non-traditional start. So I'll say that we usually use that term J-Term affectionately for any school that doesn't start in the fall. And so those schools typically are going to be INSEAD, HEC Paris, IMD, IE, and then Columbia Business School. There are some other ones that we'll also bring up, but those are the top of the list. After we get through going through these different schools, then we'll have a Q&A session so you can ask any questions that you might have. I'm going to do a quick check in the chat. Looks like we have Sarab from Mumbai in India, and trying to determine which one is most suitable for 10 years of work experience. So typically the January start or the shorter programs are actually better. Again, we'll dive into that in just a moment. If you don't know me, I'm Jen Turtschanow, the CEO of ARINGO MBA Admissions. We've been at admissions for almost 20 years, helping people get into top MBA programs across the globe, including these specialized programs. We also work with specialized masters and even undergrad. So if you need help getting into any type of program, we're here to help. And jumping in, why would you choose a January start? So again, it's this other point of entry into these MBA programs. Again, it's winter or spring starts. So it's just not this normal thing that people think about when they're considering starting an MBA program of like, oh, like I want to start in January or in the spring, because all of our lives we have had the school start in the fall. So it's just not the normal rhythm, but that's okay, because they make sure that you get everything that you need. And sometimes it's pared down or beefed up based on the school. And it is the ability to really experience the curriculum on an accelerated route. You still get all the same benefits of a typical program, but just sometimes expedited. All right, and so we have Akshay who wants to find out about the J-Term at Columbia. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting program that we'll dive into as well. So why do schools offer this? So some schools, again, they have 2 starts. And so it allows them to utilize and maximize their campus space, their faculty, the seats, etc. So it makes things even more cost effective and sometimes profitable. It is a business school. And then it attracts candidates who maybe are on a little bit of a different path. And then it can also help certain careers maintain that momentum. A lot of careers don't necessarily follow this pattern of everybody's, graduates in the spring, and you're going to need to have a recruitment class for the fall. So there's tons of employers that are going to be looking for candidates to start working for them when it like beyond the traditional graduation point of the summer. So it helps with employers as well. So why would you choose this? So again, you get to start sooner and graduate sooner. If you miss the September intake, or maybe things didn't work out for the September intake, then January lets you begin within months and not applying within another year. It does typically have a smaller cohort, again, a little less interest, which means that you're going to have a more close-knit type of classroom experience because less people in your cohort that are moving along with you. And then you also get a little more accessibility with the faculty, the career advisors, and you get a deeper connection all over with your experience. The other thing is that ROI, 10 to 16 months, and then you graduate and you get to accelerate and really get out in the workforce. And so we'll start with INSEAD. So this is really one of the premier institutions that offers this dual start. And it is one of the best schools in the world, and it has been around for a really long time. And it offers the January and the September start, and it offers multiple campuses. And then tuition, you can see all this information here and kind of understand a little bit more about the program. The average age is around 29, and people usually have about 6 years of work experience, which you see is a little bit up from the typical average age and experience for the US schools, which is a little bit closer to 5. And that is because INSEAD is actually typically a faster program, a 1-year program. So when we look at this intake difference, if you start in January, you graduate in December, and you get to add a summer internship, or you can return to your previous job, anything like that, that you want to do during that summer, study abroad, etc. You have this time period that the INSEAD traditional program does not offer. And so it's actually an expanded version of their MBA, still only 12 months, and it gives you an internship at an amazing program. If you do the August intake, you start in July and you graduate in the summer as well. And it doesn't include, you start in July and graduate within about 9-10 months, and you don't have an internship. So it is fast and rigorous, and this could be your opportunity in January to slow it down a little bit. All right. Does it make sense to apply right now to these universities or at US universities? It can, and we can dive into that at the end, closer to the Q&A session. INSEAD employment report, you can see this here. Again, you're going to get a ton of exposure to different companies, firms, and different industries. It's really well regarded as far as consulting, finance, tech, and entrepreneurship is definitely an option here as well, and gets you in that get you in the workforce faster. All right. So next is their companies that are typically recruiting here. We've got the top consulting firms, and as well as some of the higher leaders within the tech field that you can always also consider. So that was INSEAD. Okay. Yes, Shivam, you're correct. There's definitely the mecca of consulting at INSEAD. So we'll move on to HEC Paris. So a little bit about HEC Paris, if you've never heard about them before, they're founded in 1881, so a well-established program here, and it has both a fall and a January intake. And you can customize the program no matter which term you start in, whether you want it to be 12 or 16 months. It is, again, one of the most amazing top ranked programs. Technically, it's number 9 in the global Financial Times, but it often also is ranked in the top 3. We'll often hear about INSEAD, LBS, and HEC Paris as far as European UK schools go. Class size is a little over 250 students, and then the international students are high at this program as well. About 95% come from outside of France. And then the average GMAT score around 635 with a GMAT focus. And average years of work experience, again, 6 years, is pretty typical for these European programs just because they're not the typical 2-year program. And the J-Term does allow you for a longer internship in the second half of the program. This is their overall employment data. As you can see, they actually have a better spread across different industries as far as, yes, they have consulting and financial services, consulting and financial services, but they also have a little bit more as far as like marketing and sales, general management, as well as operations and human resources. Sorry, my screen's a little bit smaller. So beyond that, you can definitely have a little bit more of a broader outlook with HEC Paris as far as career outcomes go. Okay. With 4.5 years, sorry, Shivam has a question. With 4.5 years of experience, it might be difficult to target into these 6 years average schools. I would say it's an average, right? So there's people that fall above and below. So I wouldn't count myself out if I am on the lower side. A lot of these programs are actually looking for you to tell them why you're qualified and ready for the program. Okay, here we go. So top recruiters, we've got Amazon, we have L'Oreal. Again, like this is some real diversity. You can also still depend on the typical recruiters of the MBBs, but you have a little bit more diversity, more of the consumer products here. So if you're interested in something beyond consulting or finance, HEC Paris can be a really great option. Next, we're going to move on to IMD, which I love these, the terminology. So these are kind of like our internal ways that we kind of refer to them. So a boutique powerhouse, right? So I would say that IMD is this really amazing school that, again, has been ranked number 1 in Financial Times, as well as number 2 in Europe for Bloomberg. So it is a highly ranked program in Switzerland. They do have a 12-month program. They only have one start. So the January start is the only one. Average of 6 years of experience, around 30 years of age, and a little bit less on the female side of things. And about 34 different nationalities are represented. Yes, so IMD is kind of one of the ones that is off the beaten path, and not as many people know about it because it's the January start and it doesn't have a fall start like most other programs. So here's a little bit more, again, to tell you about it, is that most everyone receives a job offer and 92% switch roles. So I think that this is even a bigger factor when you're thinking of like, again, like when we're narrowing our focus down to J-term schools, INSEAD like really wants you to be ready to go. If you want a little bit more exploration or want to pivot, IMD can be a really amazing option for you. So you can go into consulting, marketing, finance, business. There's so many different things that you can do from IMD, and it's in Switzerland. So you have this connection across Europe. I would say like if this is an area that you're really interested in, this is like this region that could be an amazing option for you. And their top hiring companies aren't that different, right? So you see a lot of consumer brands here, as well as the top consulting firms. A little bit of a difference, right? Like with Hilti, Hikma, Lanza, like these are really interesting companies. And you'll see there's a lot of MNCs. So maybe when you graduate, you start in Switzerland, and then it's easy to move out with these MNCs. And you can kind of also look at this map here of where people are going after they graduate. Many of them stay in Europe, but you can still get to other countries, which also means that there's alum that are going to be within these other countries that you can make connections to and help you with getting a job if you're interested in a different geography. All right, moving on to Spain, IE. Again, a little bit of a younger program, right? A little less than, or a little bit over 40 years, very close to my birthday. So I should know that. So we've got this IE, it's in Spain, again, kind of centrally located. And it is a very flexible program. You can look at this and see they have an 11-month, a 15-month, or a 19-month program. That's just really great because I think that there's a few schools that kind of offer this flexibility in the program, and it really does help you decide of like, okay, I'm ready. I don't need the internship, or I don't need as much time, or I want as many internships as I can get. And with 19 months, you could maybe do two, one during the internship period plus one in semester or like during the program. And so I would say that this could be a really great option if you're interested in Europe. And then the GMAT score, a little bit on the lower than the typical fall starts, and it's got a 635. So it's a safer option as well. It also accepts quite a few other exams. So if you need some testing flexibility, that is definitely here for you. And 92% international, like, wow. So you're not going to be the only one moving to Spain for the first time ever, and maybe being immersed in the Spanish language and learning it as you are in the program and exploring a new world. So Rob asked, how do J-Term programs compare with regular programs for the same universities in terms of mean salary offered, or are they generally in the similar range? I would say it's pretty similar as far as the average range of salary. I think it's a couple of things that are a little bit different. It really depends on the cost of living in the region or location of the MBA program. Typically, and it's really normal for people to stay in that region. And so they're going to kind of mimic what the cost of living is in that country. And so if it's really high, then obviously the average salary will go up with that. And if it's a bit lower, then it goes down. So as far as like US versus European schools, typically you would usually have a little bit lower average salary, but that's also because the cost of living might be a little bit different when you're comparing it to some of the cities in the US, like New York or California. Those are definitely some higher cost living areas. So with IE, there's a lot of people that go into technology, which is fantastic, right? Like there are so many people who want to continue to be on this wave of AI, or I say like ahead of the wave, and knowing how to manage and to direct what happens next with it. And so this is a school that can help you be on that cutting edge. Again, there's finance, industrial, like that's completely different, but a really interesting segment of the employment for MBAs, because there are so many people who have a background in manufacturing and want to be able to continue on. And so this is, again, something where you could have a little bit of a niche that goes along with your actual program and recruiting. All right. So a little bit more about the companies that are recruiting there. Facebook or Meta, so to say, Uber. You definitely have the, Goldman Sachs, American Express. You have the MBBs, as well as pharma. And then we have those luxury FMCG brands. I mean, like, this is amazing again, because these companies need regional experts to not only help with running the business, but helping with that global expansion and being able to manage supply chains, advertising, and everything that you kind of need in another country, and having a local expert. All right. So next is Columbia. So I know that somebody was asking about Columbia. So one of our older schools, and obviously in the M7, depending on the year, it can be number 2, number 9. It just depends on the school. I mean, it just depends on the ranking in the year. But obviously a top MBA program that most people are seeking. In Columbia, things are a little bit different as far as recruitment goes. So when we talk about the J-Term entry is only 16 months compared to the 24-ish months that you spend in the 2-year program. So you are skipping the internship period and going to class instead. So you start in January and then you catch up with the class that started that fall. So you kind of catch up and graduate together. So you're part of, I would call it a micro cohort, and then you end up joining the larger cohort and graduating together. So you have different depths of relationships with everyone. And I would say you get to dig in whenever you get to that point of like a more specialized curriculum, starting in that last 6 months of the program. So tuition, very similar, and average GMAT so is closer to 730 on the old GMAT, 685 on the new. And I would say that there's a little bit of lenience with that in the J-Term, so to say, and we'll kind of jump into that. Right, I already kind of mentioned this. And then you can look at what the graduates do. Most of the time when you're looking at employment reports for any school that has dual starts, January and fall, they're going to combine the employment reports together. So you won't necessarily get a segmented report just for J-Term. They're going to report them all together. So you can ask admissions committees or current students for a lot more specific information about the J-Term cohort and kind of get a little bit more insight. And they'll be able to give it to you, but it's not in their typical reports. So you might have to dig a little bit deeper to figure something out if it's something more specific. And a way to do this is, especially like for Columbia, INSEAD, HEC Paris, is connect with the specific club that you're interested in. Let's say you want to go into consulting. So reach out to the consulting club and try to make a contact and say like, hey, I'm really interested in applying to Columbia. I'm trying to debate between the J-Term and the fall start. I wanted to see if that has any impact on recruitment, or you guys have seen the impact on recruitment. And if you can connect me with somebody from the cohort that maybe is a J-Term start in the consulting club. And usually people are really proactive and will help you with that. I have like a whole presentation on networking. So if it's something you're interested in, email me. I can help you with trying to find the right people besides just skimming through LinkedIn and trying to do deep dives, messaging people and not getting a response. All right, so we've looked at the employment data here. I mean, just the same as kind of what you would think for the fall term. Obviously, it's an M7. It's there for a big reason. Looking at that base salary, Sarab, you can see, I think it was Shivam or Sarab, I can't remember who was asking about the salaries. A little bit different here with Columbia. Again, most people will be working in New York after they graduate, and that really does persuade what that average salary is for a graduate. And you can look at different industries all across the board. Almost anything that you're looking for, Columbia can help you get there. All right. So the other schools, Okay, I want to go back. Sorry. I want to make sure that sorry. Going back to Columbia really quickly. So with Columbia, the J-term does have a little bit of a caveat. So J-term typically ends up being for people that are either entrepreneurs, people from family business, or people with higher years of work experience that don't need the internship to get a job after they graduate. Now, we can say that there's plenty of one-year programs, especially in Europe and UK, that are only 1 year, don't have internships, and people are able to get jobs without a problem. So, that's a little bit of a difference, but it can impact your OPT as well. So, like if you're going to the US, a lot of people prefer the 2-year program just because you have a little bit longer of a time period, plus the internship to help potentially yield a job after graduation. So those are things to consider. But with those caveats of these special candidates, they typically can accept a little bit wider of a range of exam scores and years of work experience. Again, because little known unknown fact is that most programs or MBA programs are going to be ranked based on their traditional 2-year full-time flagship MBA program. Any additional or other program doesn't necessarily get compiled into those rankings, and so they have the ability to consider this as special MBA start, and they don't have to report the numbers the same way they do for the traditional MBA. So you'll see a bit wider of a range. Again, that really only works for schools that have 2 intakes, and that the second intake or the January intake is a little bit different. The same thing kind of goes for like a Kellogg 1-year program or a Kellogg MBA program. So any of those specialized programs, tech MBAs, they're not necessarily ranked on those. So that's where you'll see that range of scores, age, experience, etc., will vary a little bit more. All right, now I'm ready to move on. So these are the other schools that you can look at if you're interested in a spring January start. We have ESMT Berlin, RSM, which is Rotterdam School of Management in the Netherlands, Smith of Queen's University in Canada, Singapore Management University or SMU, fantastic 1-year program, and Schulich. So really amazing programs that are also up for consideration for January or an non-fall start. So when we talk about J-term, we are going to talk about the fact that it is the same MBA program. It is going to be rigorous. It is going to be hard. They are still recruiting for people that are going to be successful in the program. So it doesn't necessarily change the caliber of the candidate. Again, they may give a little bit of wiggle room for exam scores or work experience, but they're still recruiting for high caliber candidates. So that part doesn't change. You'll still maintain the core part of the MBA program. Again, some things might shift as far as whether you get the internship or you don't get the internship. So keeping that in mind and making sure that you're kind of charting out of like, okay, so if I go this route, I have this. And if I go this route, this school, these are the differences, and I'm on board. I'm ready for it. So you can kind of make your selection for what schools you want to apply to through that. Then the other thing is that, you could have some dramatic cost savings depending on even if it's still the same amount of time, 12 months, but you're ready to start now versus waiting until the fall start. You could save that 6 months worth of being in a job that you feel overqualified for, or that really isn't benefiting you in your future. So even starting sooner than later can be a fantastic option for the January starts, because you get in the classroom and get closer to that new job promotion and hopefully new salary. Beyond that, you can always be strategic about how you want to start these programs and which programs you want to apply to. I have a lot of students that are like, okay, I'm really interested in M7, and so I'm applying to them for fall start. And then we kind of talk about backup options of, okay, so if things aren't working out for round 1 or maybe round 2, there is always this backup option of applying to the J-Term at INSEAD or HEC Paris or some other schools. So you can kind of plan your the layout and timing of your applications based on adding in the J-Term. All right. So beyond that, we're ready for questions. If you need help, we're here. That's what ARINGO does. Again, we've been here for the past 20 years, and we will be able to help you through all parts of the application, from determining your strategy to interview prep and even scholarship negotiation, or if needed, waitlist assistance. So we are here. You can always schedule an appointment with me. You can use a QR code here, or we've added the link to my calendar in the YouTube description. So just go ahead and go down there. And while you're there, go ahead and give us a thumbs up and share with your friends, please. We'd really appreciate that. Okay, so I'm looking to see if we've missed any questions. So while I do that, you guys go ahead and add more so that I can answer any questions you might have before we get done for today. All right, we've talked about the salary. So as far as timing of J-Term applications, INSEAD's J-Term application round 1 is already coming up in March. I want to double check that now. But you'll see that applications are starting now for J-Term of the January 27th start. And so you have a little bit of leeway. I would say, like, even if you're an overrepresented candidate, that you could even consider round 2, still competitive for J-Term. Again, there's less people, that are applying. So you have a little bit more leeway, and maybe where you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I can only apply in round 1 for these really top programs. A little bit different with the rush for the J-Term. So yes, those applications are opening now. And then, this is the other caveat of Columbia. As far as their application for J-Term, the J-Term application actually is published with their fall start. So their application for January 27 will open around late May and will close in October. So their final deadline is in October. Similar questions for the application, much shorter time frame, much more like a rolling basis as far as interviews go and notifications. So not the same cadence as the fall timeline, but it is a little bit different. For all other schools, the application is opening now or is already open, and deadlines are starting in February and March for the most part, and will end closer to that October-November deadline time period for that J-Term. So with that being said, let's see what other questions we have. I am planning to give my GMAT in March, and sadly, I don't know if I'll be able to apply. Again, I think that you have the opportunity to apply in round 2 for these schools, or HEC has application deadline every month. So, you could still do the 3rd or 4th month or deadline for them as well. Okay, let's see if there were any other questions. Please go ahead and add them. Okay, so Uni Matthew asked does it make sense right now to apply to US universities? Well, lots of caveats. So if you're an international student, typically the final deadline is that round 2 or January deadline. I would say if you come from a country that has really strong relationships with the US, then likely there could be a chance okay, the reason that schools do this is because they're worried that you're not going to have enough time to get your visa. So if your processing time for visas in your country to the US is shorter, then you're more likely to potentially get a spot. If it's longer, then maybe not. So a lot of that depends on visa wait times and relationships between countries right now. So I would definitely drill down on that to see whether it makes sense or not. You can also always ask the admissions committee. You can have a conversation with them, but a lot of them do advertise that it's the final deadline for international students for round 2 or January, or maybe even February, if that. So that's, what I would say. If you are a domestic candidate and live within the US, maybe even Canada or North America, I would say there's a chance that things could go better for you for admission, just because of proximity as well for these other countries within North America. So that's kind of who I would say should apply in these later rounds for US schools. I'm not saying you can't apply and that people don't get admitted. I'm always going to be cautious, and I want to make sure you know the lay of the land before you make those decisions. But yeah, usually the later rounds are for domestic recruitment for the US. A little bit different for most other schools. They are usually pretty open outside of the US for candidates to apply throughout the entire cycle. They'll let you know if there's something that they're worried about and put it in their deadlines of like international students need to apply by this deadline. All right. So Shivam Kumar says, I have right now 2 years, 8 months of experience. If I apply for September intake for 27, I'll have 4 years of experience. If I apply for J-Term, it will be 3.5. So I imagine your question is like, which one should you do? And I will tell you that I have had a client that applied with under 3 years of work experience to INSEAD last year. And, we kind of talked about the risks that are there of maybe them not thinking you have enough experience, etc., and encouraged him to talk to the admissions team. And the admissions person he spoke to said, look, it's up to you. If you feel ready and confident that it is time for you to get your MBA, then put that in your application. You're leading us. You're leading this process. This is your application. You tell us why you're ready. And so we did that, got the application together, and he got admitted to J-Term with less than 3 years of work experience. It's amazing. He's graduated and he's now doing some entrepreneurial ventures. So it's exciting. Can Sarab ask if someone with a modest GMAT score but high work experience can aim at a top university? I think it depends on what that work experience is. And I'm happy to talk about that offline too. So go ahead and schedule a time for us to chat more in depth. But let's say that you've been in consulting for closer to 10 years of work at an MBB, right? Like, so, that's going to be something that you're going to have some specialized knowledge that you can share with your cohort. I think the other thing that you need to do is to be able to prove that you're going to be looking for jobs that would hire you with higher years of work experience. That's one of the big concerns for an MBA program. One, making sure that they have the right fit for candidates, but two, also making sure that you're going to be employed. That's, the goal of the program, but it's also part of their rankings. So they're looking for people who can get employed as soon as possible, but really before 3 months out of graduation, they want you to be employed. And so if they feel like you're going to struggle, that could put some doubt in the mind of the AdCom. If you have a job planned and lined up, fantastic. This is, again, like another point to J-Term is sometimes better for candidates that are in a family business or they're being sponsored for an MBA by their company, so they're going directly back, or they have the work experience needed to make a pivot or to make an advancement in their career where they're not going to need an internship to gain that experience before being recruitable for a job. So those are the things I would take into consideration, especially with higher years of work experience. What are your career goals? If you've been in, product management for a while and want to pivot from, again, like consumer goods to tech, that might be a strong possibility. As far as product management goes, the companies typically don't care if you have too much years of work experience or your age. Like an MBB consulting firm or maybe investment banking, private equity, they're definitely looking for those people that are going to be workhorses and really be up to the challenge of, either traveling quite a bit, working 80, 90 hours a week, etc. So they want somebody who's a little bit younger and up to the travel, up to the endurance, and worth the investment of employing immediately after being able to, kind of have continuity after being employed, because they're going to make that investment in you for the first 2+ years. So they want to make sure they're going to get their return on investment and you're going to stay in it for a while and not be like, oh, now I'm, 35 and I should get married and have kids and I need to slow down, etc. So that can play into employability afterwards, which plays into admissions. Okay, so that was, I think, most of the questions. I'll wait for just a few more minutes, but in the end, like J-Term is a really fantastic option, whether that's getting in earlier or a backup plan or something that's just right. This is like almost like the Goldilocks story of like it can fit in multiple things. And you really do, need to do some research to make sure it's the right fit for you. And I'm happy to kind of give you some direction one-on-one to decide if these are viable options for you. But I think it's worth considering and, putting it on your radar and deciding if it's something you want to take that next step with. Beyond that, yeah, excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Please like and share this session, and I hope to speak to you guys soon. Thank you so much for joining.